But what happened before the world ever saw Captain Kirk is one of the strangest stories in television history. In fact, Star Trek almost ended before it even began. In the early 1960s, television was full of westerns, family comedies, and detective shows. Science fiction was often seen as risky. Many TV executives believed audiences would never watch a serious space adventure every week. But one man had a very different dream. That man was Gene Roddenberry. Before creating Star Trek, he worked as a police officer and later became a television writer. He imagined a future where people from different backgrounds worked together, explored the stars, and solved problems with courage and intelligence instead of fear. It was an exciting idea, but convincing a television network was another challenge. Roddenberry created the first pilot episode, called The Cage. It starred Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Christopher Pike, instead of William Shatner's Captain James T. Kirk. The crew also looked very different. One of the most unusual characters was Number One, played by Majel Barrett. She was calm, logical, and served as a captain second in command, a rare role for a woman on television in 1965. When NBC watched the pilot, the response surprised almost everyone. The network believed it was too intellectual and moved too slowly. Some executives thought viewers would find it confusing. Others were unsure about its serious tone and complex ideas. Normally, a rejected pilot meant the end of a television project. But something unexpected happened. Instead of canceling the show completely, NBC made a decision that was almost unheard of. They gave Roddenberry another chance and ordered a second pilot. It was one of the very few times in television history that a network paid for two different pilot episodes for the same series. Here's a question for you. If you had been an NBC executive in 1965, would you have taken the risk and given Star Trek a second chance? Let us know your answer in the comments. The second pilot introduced a brand new captain, James T. Kirk, played by William Shatner. Leonard Nimoy returned as Mr. Spock, although even his character changed. In the first pilot, Spock smiled more often. As the series developed, he became the calm, logical Vulcan that millions of fans would grow to love. Many parts of the expensive first pilot were not wasted. To save money, the production team later reused scenes from The Cage in the two-part episode The Menagerie. Clever editing turned old footage into a completely new story, making television history once again. No one knew it then, but this second chance would launch one of the most influential science fiction franchises ever created. Yet even after finally reaching television screens, the crew of the USS Enterprise faced strange production problems, surprising conflicts, and bizarre behind-the-scenes moments that few viewers ever imagined. Just when Star Trek finally made it onto television, another problem appeared. The cameras were rolling, but behind the scenes, strange accidents, clever tricks, and unexpected tensions made every episode a challenge. Some of the show's weirdest facts never appeared on screen. Making a science fiction series in 1966 was far from easy. The show's budget was limited, yet the scripts called for alien planets, futuristic technology, and space battles almost every week. Since computer-generated effects did not exist, the crew had to rely on creativity. One surprising trick involved the USS Enterprise itself. The famous starship looked huge on television, but it was actually a carefully built model. To make it appear as if it was flying through space, special effects artists moved cameras very slowly around the model while shining lights from different angles. Even tiny movements had to be perfect. One mistake meant filming the shot all over again. Then there were the transporter scenes. Today, viewers are used to advanced visual effects, but in the 1960s, the beaming effect was created with simple techniques. According to members of the production team, sparkling aluminum powder, lighting effects, and careful film editing helped create the illusion that people were disappearing and reappearing. It looked magical to audiences, even though it was made with surprisingly simple methods. Another strange fact involved Mr. Spock's famous ears. Leonard Nimoy spent hours in makeup before filming each day. The pointed ears were attached with special glue, but hot studio lights often caused them to loosen. Sometimes they even started peeling away during filming, forcing the crew to stop and fix them before continuing. William Shatner also had his own challenges. As Captain Kirk, he performed many action scenes himself. Fight sequences with aliens often looked exciting on screen, but they were physically demanding. Several cast members later shared in interviews that long filming days and heavy costumes made production exhausting. One of the most unusual stories involved tribbles, the small, furry creatures introduced in the episode The Trouble with Tribbles. The production team created hundreds of these saw props. During filming, they rolled everywhere across the set. Some even disappeared after production, with cast and crew joking that tribbles had a habit of escaping just like they did in the episode. Around this point in the show's journey, it became clear that Star Trek was offering something different from any other television series. If you enjoy discovering the hidden stories behind classic TV shows and the people who created them, subscribe now. There are many more incredible stories waiting to be uncovered. But the biggest surprises were still ahead. While the crew worked hard behind the cameras, the stories appearing on screen were quietly changing television history. Some episodes challenged social rules, started national conversations, and included moments that would be remembered for decades. And one scene in particular would become one of the most talked about moments in television history. But the real surprise wasn't happening behind the cameras anymore. It was happening on television screens across America. Week after week, Star Trek quietly broke rules that many other shows were afraid to touch, and some viewers couldn't believe what they were seeing. When Star Trek first aired in 1966, America was going through a time of great change. The civil rights movement was reshaping the country. The Cold War created fear and uncertainty, and the space race inspired people to dream about the future. Instead of avoiding these real-world issues, Star Trek used science fiction to talk about them in a new way. One of the show's boldest choices was its diverse crew. The bridge of the USS Enterprise included people from different countries, cultures, and even different planets. Gene Roddenberry believed that humanity could have a better future if people learned to work together instead of fighting each other. That idea was revolutionary for its time. Lieutenant Uhura, played by Nichelle Nichols, became one of the first black women on American television to appear in a major role that was not based on stereotypes. Instead of being shown as a servant or a background character, she was a skilled communications officer and an important member of the crew. According to Nichols, she once considered leaving the show, but after meeting civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., she changed her mind. She later shared in many interviews that King told her Star Trek was showing a future where people of different races work together as equals. He encouraged her to stay because her role mattered to millions of viewers. Then came one of the most famous moments in television history. In the 1968 episode, Plato's Stepchildren, Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura shared what is widely recognized as one of American network television's first interracial kisses between scripted lead characters. The scene created headlines, sparked debate, and made television history. Some television stations reportedly worried about audience reactions. Yet the episode aired, and over time, the moment became one of the defining symbols of Star Trek's message of equality and hope. The show also explored war, prejudice, fear, and political conflict through stories about alien worlds. Episodes like Let That Be Your Last Battlefield used science fiction to reflect real-life racism. Instead of directly pointing at today's problems, the series invited viewers to think for themselves. By the late 1960s, Star Trek had earned loyal fans, but ratings remained disappointing. NBC struggled to justify keeping the expensive series on the air. Every new season felt uncertain. Here's something many of us can relate to. Sometimes the ideas that seem too different at first become the ones that change the world. Have you ever believed in something before everyone else understood it? Share your story in the comments. You never know who you might inspire. The future of Star Trek was hanging by a thread. Fans launched one of television's earliest letter-writing campaigns to save the series. But even that couldn't stop what happened next. The show was about to be canceled. Ironically, that cancellation became the first step toward an even greater legacy, one that no one at NBC could have imagined. When Star Trek was canceled in 1969, many people thought its journey was over. But something incredible happened instead. The show's strangest ideas began appearing in the real world, making fans wonder if science fiction had somehow predicted the future. At first, The cancellation seemed like the end of Gene Roddenberry's dream. The original series lasted only 3 seasons and 79 episodes. Compared to many successful shows of its time, that was a short run. But once the episodes entered syndication, they reached new audiences across the United States and around the world. Every rerun created more fans, and those fans included young people who would later become scientists, engineers, astronauts, and inventors. One of the most talked about examples is the communicator. Captain Kirk would flip open a small handheld device to contact members of his crew. Decades later, flip phones became a familiar part of everyday life. While engineers didn't literally copy the prop, many have said Star Trek inspired them to imagine portable communication devices long before they became reality. The series also featured handheld medical scanners that could examine patients without surgery. Today, hospitals use advanced scanning technology that, while far more complex, reflects the same basic dream of fast, non-invasive diagnosis. Researchers have even pointed to Star Trek as one source of inspiration for future medical tools. Another strange addiction involved tablet-like computers. Crew members often carried flat electronic devices to read reports and enter information. In the 1960s, that looked like pure fantasy. Today, tablets are used in schools, hospitals, businesses, and even aboard the International Space Station. Perhaps the most famous example is the voice-controlled computer. On the Enterprise, crew members simply spoke their questions, and a computer answered. Modern voice assistants, such as Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant, aren't identical, but they show just how close reality has come to what once seemed impossible. NASA has also acknowledged the show's cultural influence. Several astronauts have spoken about growing up watching Star Trek. In fact, Nichelle Nichols later worked with NASA on recruitment programs, helping encourage more women and people from underrepresented communities to consider careers in science and space exploration. These weren't magical predictions. Gene Roddenberry and his writers imagined a future built on curiosity, science, and hope. Their stories encourage people to ask a simple but powerful question. What if? That question changed lives. The original series may have ended, but its influence kept growing. Movies, new television series, books, conventions, and millions of devoted fans turned Star Trek into one of the biggest entertainment franchises in history. But there was one final twist that nobody expected. The show that struggled to survive would eventually build an empire far greater than anyone involved in 1966 could have imagined. The greatest twist in the story of Star Trek wasn't a battle in space or a strange alien encounter. It was what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. The series that many believed had failed became one of the most successful and influential franchises in entertainment history. When NBC canceled Star Trek in 1969, the cast and crew had little reason to believe the adventure would continue. Ratings had never matched the show's growing reputation. But something unusual happened in the years that followed. Through reruns, the series found millions of new viewers. Fans who had missed the original broadcast now discovered the adventures of Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, Dr. McCoy, and the rest of the Enterprise crew. The fan community grew larger every year. Conventions began bringing thousands of people together to celebrate the show. They dressed as their favorite characters, discussed episodes in detail, and built lifelong friendships around a television series that had once struggled to stay on the air. Star Trek proved that passionate fans could keep a story alive long after the original run had ended. Hollywood soon noticed. In 1979, the crew returned in Star Trek, the motion picture, proving there was still enormous interest in the franchise. More films followed, along with successful television series such as Star Trek, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and others. Each new generation introduced fresh audiences to the universe Gene Roddenberry had imagined decades earlier. The franchise also expanded far beyond television and film. There were novels, comic books, video game, collectibles, museum exhibits, documentaries, and licensed merchandise sold around the world. What began as a risky science fiction show evolved into a global entertainment empire, worth billions of dollars. One reason Star Trek has lasted so long is that its message still feels personal. Almost everyone has faced moments when they felt different, misunderstood, or uncertain about the future. The series reminds us that our differences can become our greatest strengths, and that working together often leads to discoveries we could never make alone. Even today, fans continue debating mysteries from the original series. Which captain was the greatest? Which episode told the strongest story? Which piece of Star Trek technology will become reality next? Those conversations keep the franchise alive, proving that its greatest power isn't just spaceships or special effects. It's imagination. Looking back, the original 1966 series gave us far more than 20 weird facts. It gave us stories of courage, curiosity, hope, and a vision of the future that still inspires scientists, writers, engineers, and dreamers across the world. And perhaps that's the strangest fact of all. A television show that nearly disappeared became a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it chooses exploration over fear. Retention CTA. But this is only one incredible story from the golden age of Hollywood and television. Another legendary series hides even more unbelievable behind-the-scenes secrets, surprising rivalries, and untold moments. If you enjoyed this journey, don't miss the next documentary.